Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.
Well, when Silvana Landa McAdam first moved to Ireland, she only planned to stay for a few years. Now, 24 years later, the former L'Oreal employee has built a business from Ireland that is exporting all over the world. Silvana joins us now to discuss what is next for her business, Landa Bags. Silvana, we'll be discussing your business, Landa Bags, and your plans for global expansion. But first, as a person of Argentinian and Italian descent, what prompted your move to Ireland 24 years ago?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, well, as my mom is Italian, it was easy enough to travel with an Italian passport anywhere I wanted. And I decided to come to Ireland with the idea of staying for maybe a year or two. And then 24 years after, I'm still here, married to an Irishman. My kids are Irish, so I'm very much, part of here. But the initial plan wasn't to move for so long, yeah.
I would like to hear about your time working in the multinational beauty and fashion industry, as it was this experience which inspired you to establish Landa Bags.
Yeah, definitely. I worked for L'Oreal, the luxury division for many years. And I suppose I saw the whole 360, from where you collect, or well, not me, but the labs collect the raw materials all the way to producing, to the marketing, to the packaging, the consumer, the whole spectrum. And I was fascinated by brands, always. So I knew that at some stage I would launch something, from me with my own stamp, and I wanted a product.
And what were the most valuable lessons and insights that you picked up at L'Oreal?
Oh, so many. I suppose there's something really crucial, and that is always have the consumer in mind, because you can have a beautiful idea or something that you want to launch, and then I've seen product after product being launched and not selling, and then others that were constantly selling, and then there's something there about really being customer-centric. So that was one. Number two, it's you work relentless hours in something, and you may have to pull the plug sometimes, and change. I suppose you have to be very dynamic and ready to pivot all the time.
Talk to us about your products and how they stand out from other bags that your customers can choose from.
Yeah, I suppose, for us, we are constantly innovating, all the time. Like you will always see new products that we're bringing to the market. Like we don't run huge productions. They are kind of small enough, good enough to scale, and we are in a few different markets. But we are always, we have a few products that are bread and butter. They are year round, and then we are always innovating, and people love that. That we have something fresh, something new. Keeps the brand exciting. And we're always also, testing, new materials or mixing some materials. But above all, for us, I think it's the mix between quality and function. So the products are beautiful to look at, but also there's so much to say for, the quality of them, how we finish them, how we produce them, and then that they work, that they have a function, and there are sometimes multiple ways of wearing one particular product. And I think that keeps us ahead of the competition. Yeah.
And when it comes to innovation, where do you draw your inspiration from, and what process do you follow when approaching innovation within the business?
I design with my colleague Paul, and we sit down and we go, okay, so where are women at the moment? What are they doing? What do they need? Like, again, back to the customer focus, So we go, okay, so we need such and such size bag that will fulfill a certain function for women that are doing X, Y, and Z. So we do focus on women. What are they doing? What do they need? What are they carrying? Because life moves, and so you need to make sure that you are moving, adapting, being flexible, with what women are carrying. Before, many years ago, nobody was carrying a water bottle, or, during COVID, we had to adapt and design for carrying I don't know, a mask and a little hand sanitizer. So I think life moves on. So you need to kind of, now people are traveling again. So we're back on bigger bags and so on. Yeah.
And while the bags which you produce are typically designed with women in mind, is the market for men's bags growing both here in Ireland and abroad?
Yes, definitely. We actually, at the very beginning when we launched our brand, we had only one product for men. And it was slow to sell. This is like 6.5 years ago. But we noticed that we had put zero input into, marketing. We weren't really pushing the product. It eventually sold. But then on the other spectrum, we did something last year, a collaboration with Maggie. We had a product for men. We had a wash bag. And again, we put some, focus behind it. We kind of, not that we promoted the product, but we were aware that it was there. We wanted to talk to men about the product, and it sold really well. So definitely, I think men are looking for new products also. Again, back from my skincare days, now you see so many brands that do skincare for men, but back in the day, it was a slower thing. Men were more into just a couple of simple products, and now they want everything. So definitely there is a market for men's products, yeah.
And while you focus on both function and quality, talk to us about your raw materials. Where are you sourcing them from?
Yeah, so we try to source them locally. Like we have 2 factories, and we try to source the materials, closer to the factories. And it is so crucial to, like every single piece, like we only work with tanneries that have something called LWG. So it's a leather working group. And it is the highest certification that you can get in our industry, in the leather world. And we have the gold standard, which is, the highest you can get. For us, it's so important to think back to how at the tanneries, treating the raw material, how, the dyeing process, all of that is really, really crucial. But then you move into the hardware, the lining, even the edge painting, like what we use to paint all the edges, which makes a huge difference, between a non-high-end bag and a higher-end bag, how you finish the product. And we use a really nice, eco-friendly apricot oil to paint, and all of that. So every single part, every single material that we use, we really put a lot of effort and time.
And Silvana, is sustainability an important consideration for consumers when purchasing accessories like bags?
There is more and more awareness, but there's also a lot of misunderstanding, I think. Whenever I can, or whenever we can, we take the time to explain things to the customer in the way that we see, the way we understand, how a product that's well made is going to last a lot longer, rather than you buy cheap, you buy twice kind of way. So, yeah, there's more awareness, but I think there's still a lot of confusion in our industry. Yeah.
And how many international markets are you currently supplying bags to?
At the moment, I'll say there's about over 20 countries. Through our website, we definitely supply, to 20 plus countries, so globally. But we also have some point of sale in some markets. Predominantly, of course, Ireland is the main market, but then the UK, Europe, Switzerland, Austria, Germany. We're now developing some other new markets.
In terms of selling directly to consumers internationally, what channels have worked best for you when scaling the business?
Well, we have tried a couple of different platforms. So like Zalando, like Wolf & Badger, but our own website is still the best. So direct to consumer and coming from us, it has been the best in terms of international. But of course, there are a lot of new platforms that we're now talking to expand in certain markets where they are better known, and it will accelerate our growth in those markets. So I suppose it's all about being in the right place, exactly the same as being in the right shop, in the right store. Like we sold in Brand Thomas for 4 years in a row, during the summer, and that was like the perfect customer base for us. Like our audience was there. Likewise, with the platform, you could be in the wrong one and not sell much, and then put a bit of effort doing some research. You go to the perfect marketplace, and that's the one that has your audience. People that are shopping for your bag and similar types. So yeah, it's all about positioning and awareness.
And what particular strategies have worked best in generating traffic to your website to make those purchases?
We changed, I think, 4 or 5 times different marketing companies. We are really happy at the moment, and for the first time, I feel like we're really communicating and getting somewhere. But it's all about, there's so much trial and error. In terms of how do you work your marketing, how do you communicate, and we realized recently that it truly is about, the brand messaging, the authenticity of the brand. The people want to know, the behind the scene, the who's behind the brand, what's happening with, how do we operate in the office with the team. All of that before we kept very much to ourselves, and now we feel, no, people want to know. In a very genuine way, so we're doing a bit more of that rather than keeping it all to ourselves, And I think the days for big monograms, big logos that are recognized, I'm talking about the ones around that price point. People have moved away. Like, it's been proven that people are moving away. They want to shop. They're more conscious. They want to shop from brands with with a story, where they understand what they're doing, how they operate. And if you can produce something beautiful that's going to last and it's functional, that's it. You have a winning formula, I think. Yeah.
And what has been the greatest challenge that you have faced as you've scaled the business internationally?
There are quite a few, but also sometimes it could be easier than you think, I think the first challenge is sometimes time. Time and funding, of course, but time to do a proper market research. You may have an idea of, what a good market is like or the size of the market, but until you do a proper research, I've wasted time and money going to some markets that I thought were really good for us. And then I suppose you learn that you have to spend a bit more time refining the research, how you're going to approach that market, because every market is different, and a way of talking to a buyer in Ireland is not the same as in the Nordics, in Canada, in the Middle East. It all changes. Research and time to do all of that has been a challenge, and of course, funding too. To be able to, with a small team. You need, we're all hands-on, and if one is traveling, so that's also the classic, the classic challenge, I suppose.
And Silvana, you mentioned about people moving away from the big brands. Of course, on TikTok in recent weeks, since the announcement of the tariffs from the US, we've seen a lot of videos, these multinational brands actually getting a lot of the manufacturing done in China, the badging of the product being done in Italy or France. Is that something that you were aware of?
You know what? There is all sorts of things. You would be surprised, because you could go to China and there's a fabulous high-end factory doing an exquisite job with a small factory, paying everyone well. And then you could go to Italy, like I've seen this firsthand in Italy, where that's the place treated like a sweatshop, like not paying well, people not happy in the factory, using materials that are not high-end. I suppose you do see everything. It's about finding, the right partner, the right factory that's going to go with your, that's going to tick the boxes, ethically in what you want to do. And I suppose that's a big part of this, but you hear and you see things everywhere. You can't believe that only in Europe, you have amazing factories, and outside of here, not. We've never worked with India, but I believe, for example, there are some great factories, super ethical, and then the other extreme. So, I mean, that's a hard topic, I suppose,
Yeah. And of course, your business, Landa Bags is supported by Enterprise Ireland. How important has their support been in building your business internationally?
Well, they have been actually really, really good to us, particularly the teams outside of Ireland. So all the Enterprise Ireland offices based, for export outside of here, they have been phenomenal. Some of them more than others, of course, the ones that we have been working closely with. But they have been really supportive, really good. We've done market visits, we've done research together. They've provided a few introductions, to some key people in the industry. So I have to say our experience is really, really positive, with them. Yeah.
And finally, I know that you plan to raise €500,000 in funding to further boost your international presence with Landa. So what markets will you be targeting next?
We are, at the moment, we are putting a very big focus in Canada. Last year, we were really, and with Enterprise Ireland, we also put a lot of effort into the U.S. And then just before the whole Trump effect, we were already thinking about Canada. I don't know how, don't ask me why, but we were already thinking about Canada. And then in the last few weeks, it's becoming, better for us. We are really focused on that, and we have a few connections. We have a trip planned in next month in June. So we feel there's a lot that's going to happen there. And also, apart from, of course, we will continue to develop Europe because, there's a lot more for us to do here. But also Australia is another very, very attractive market where we have some connections, and we are, we're working kind of hard to get that happening also. It's a massive market.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Silvana Landa McAdam from Landa Bags. And the growth trajectory for this business is certainly very positive.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Carl Fitzpatrick.